For quite some time now, reports of satanic cult activity and crimes linked to satanic cult activity have been dismissed by the enlightened as just mere superstition. However, a recent event which made front-page headlines throughout North America and the world served to dispel skeptical disbelief. A drug-smuggling satanic cult in northern Mexico was raided by the authorities. The raid revealed 15 bodies, many of which were sacrificed in satanic ritual to obtain protection of Satan against being discovered and foiled. One victim's vertebrae was used as a necklace. I'm Julius Smetona. This is what Catholics believe. In ABC's 2020 several years ago, the reporter said that Satanism is alive and well and thriving in every state of the Union. The Satanic Bible by Anton Chandor LaVey has gone through 30 printings and has sold many hundreds of thousands of copies. It is even said that this book is in such demand that it can't even be purchased at many bookstores. Managers would say the reason is the young people want to become involved with Satanism and initiated in Satanism. This is what Catholics believe. We're talking about satanic cults. My guests are Father William Jenkins, a Catholic priest who rejects Vatican II and says the traditional Latin Mass exclusively, and Father Donald Sanborn. Father Sanborn, Father Jenkins, welcome to What Catholics Believe.
Thank you, Julius.
Now, there's a report that, at least, of the reports I've read, at least 100,000 people seem to be involved with satanic activity, and that's a downside figure. On the higher side, over 1 million people are actively involved in worshiping the devil, casting spells, and so forth. What's the allure behind this sinister type of action?
You have to understand that in the human heart there is a ingrained knowledge and desire for the supernatural. And it is the true God who is the one that correctly fulfills that desire and makes man happy. But if man turns his back on God, he will look for the fulfillment of the supernatural desire in other ways. And now we are seeing in this completely godless world that we live in a turn to the satanic. However, it is not something very new. When the Protestant ministers came to this country, for example, they saw that many of the inhabitants of this country were actually involved in devil worship. And we also know that the inhabitants of Mexico and South America were involved in devil worship and human sacrifice. The great pyramids of Mexico were actually places on which the sacrifices took place. And they would go the whole day there, cutting out the hearts of people and then throwing the bodies down those steps. Satanism is old. There was even evidence found in the island of Crete that the inhabitants there, the early Greeks, did human sacrifice and worship demons. The human race has a tendency to do this, and has done it for a great many years.
Father Jenkins, are you concerned about this problem, and why is it much more evident now than, say, 30 years ago?
Well, yes, I am concerned about this problem, and I think any reasonable person would be. We find that in supplementing what Father Sanborn said, there is a great craving for power and pleasure in the perverse human heart due to original sin, and that Satan promises this power and pleasure. We also see that there is a great fascination with the weird and the bizarre today. We find this both in the forms of entertainment which are being offered. We find this in architecture. We find this in art. distorted, strange, twisted shapes, the meaning of which is very subjective. We find there's a fascination for the bizarre and the weird also in terms of movie entertainment. People flock to horror movies. Horror movies go through 2, 3, 4, 5 sequels now. And they're all slice and dice movies. They're called very gory.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Right.
Sure. And there's something in the human spirit that is coming out now that has been somewhat repressed or held in check for centuries by the true faith, by the Roman Catholic faith. It is all gushing out now with a vengeance. And I am very, very concerned about this. The result of this is supposed to be a worldwide satanic religion, which is going to glorify the lusts of a fallen human nature, which is going to worship Satan, but Satan with the face of a man.
Father Sanborn.
You should also go back to the Church's doctrine of original sin, and that is that Adam and Eve fell at the suggestion of Satan and became the slaves of Satan, became condemned to his lot, and that it was by the blood of Christ that we were redeemed from this slavery of Satan. But if men turn their back on Christ, their natural tendency then will be to descend into the slavery of Satan. If they turn their back on the redemption and embrace lust and embrace avarice and materialism, the natural end of all of that is a worship of Satan, who is the prince of this world.
Jenkins, there's a book that was published actually in 1968 for the first printing called The Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, it took quite an effort on my part to obtain a copy because these bookstore owners said that it's gone. I asked why. Young kids want to get into Satanism. What do you know about this book?
Well, the book was first printed in 68 or 69 by a man who was born and given the name Howard Levy. And he, according to the introduction to the book, was involved in the occult, or at least attracted to the occult from the earliest days of his life. When I looked through his book, I was not impressed with it. I can't understand why it is so popular today. It seems to me to be the literary whinings of a frustrated Don Juan, who just wants to give vent to all of his libido. But evidently it holds a great attraction for many young people today. I think the book basically is like a declaration that we are going to worship now everything that we should be ashamed of. St. Paul in his epistle to the Romans talks about gods being their stomachs. Well, I think that is true of LaVey and those who read his book and fall for it. I think they've turned their stomachs into their gods. They're worshiping all of their native impulses. What he has done, really, is taken fallen human nature and said, this is the standard of his sanctity. Whatever lust, whatever gluttony, whatever pride is to be found in the human nature, that is his God now.
You know, it's interesting that LaVey's face, he played the part of the devil in Rosemary's Baby. I looked at the book a little bit myself, and I'd like to get your reaction on this. My personal feeling is that people are going to be very attracted to Satanism, because what he says is, why sacrifice your life for a heaven you don't even know exists? Enjoy everything now. And there actually seems to arise a hatred for God, because God says you have to control yourself, and they say, no, let's do anything we want.
Human beings go one way or the other. They do not simply stay in the middle between God and Satan. They either will be part of the city of man, which is Satan's city, or the city of God. They will be part of the kingdom of this earth, which is Satan's domain, or they will be part of the kingdom of God. It is impossible that they find something in between. That's the reason for that. Human beings will be drawn into one or the other.
What I find very ironic about the Satanic Bible of LaVey is that for 3 years he claims to have been a photographer for the San Francisco Crime Investigation Department. And he would go out and photograph the results of crimes. He'd photograph the broken body of a child on the side of the road after being hit by a hit-and-run driver, or someone having been stabbed to death, and so on. Now, what he does then is turn around and institute a religion which glorifies the very dark forces in human nature which committed those crimes. We're told in that book that he detested the crimes that he saw, and he was horrified at the ugliness that he saw in these crimes. And yet he turns around and institutes a religion of human selfishness, which is the very problem that gave rise to those crimes in the first place. I find it extremely hypocritical.
No, I understand that he has some, at the time the book was written, the Vatican Council was 3 years old. I understand he made some interesting observations about the changes in the Roman Catholic Church.
Do you know what he says? If you look through the version that I read, the pages 46 to 49, LaVey says that those changes in the church were inspired by Satan. He said that the dropping of Latin in the Mass, the changing of the nuns' habits, in particular he singles that out, were inspired by the devil. And he's taking credit for it. He's not trying to warn people away. He's saying that, hey, this is wonderful. Look what Satan has accomplished in the church. He even predicts that in the years ahead, now remember, this is 1969, that in the years ahead we're going to see nuns gyrating lewdly around the altar. And of course, in the years since then, we've seen these liturgical dances around the table they have at their modern so-called masses, and women in leotards prancing around there. So, see, LaVey knew what he was talking about. The devil knew what he was out to accomplish. But what I found very interesting as an introduction to his statement about what the church did and how Satan is so happy about it, he said that the more liberal the church becomes, the more satanic it becomes. And he complains in that book. He says, look, why don't they just admit it, that they are actually working toward establishing a satanic religion? Why do they continue being so sanctimonious and hypocritical in saying that they're still Christian? He says what they should do is simply come out and acknowledge that they are becoming satanic, and that Satanism really is the religion of the future.
This is what Catholics believe. I'm Julius. You know, there's another book which was written some years previous called The Satan Seller by Mike Warnke. Now, this gentleman was a satanic high priest who was dumped from this movement, so to speak, and then he lived to tell about his experiences, and I think he started an outreach program to rescue people from these cults. He talked about actually putting spells on people, invoking demons, and actually seeing these demons attack people. And I find it very curious that when he's writing about these instances, we see that the order of exorcist has been dropped from the order of priesthood following the Second Vatican Council. And similarly, the exorcism performed at the baptism is no longer performed. Could you tell me something about this?
It is true that the modern church has dropped the ordination of men as exorcists. Now they have two minor orders. Reader and acolyte, I guess they're called. And there used to be four. One of them was exorcist. They've dropped that entirely. So that those who are ordained modern priests of the conciliar church, that is the Church of Vatican II, have not received that order of exorcist. We find also that in the new rite of baptism, which is now called the rite of Christian initiation, the exorcisms have been dropped. That was so ridiculous and so sad that Paul VI, the one who arranged for that, the new rite, and approved it, later regretted it publicly. He publicly said he regretted that they removed those exorcisms. And I wonder what moved him to make a public statement about that. But he did not restore the exorcisms to the rite of baptism. I think what we find here is that there is not only a disregard of the modern church for the powers of the devil, but in some ways almost a kind of collusion with the powers of the devil. If you read what LaVey wrote in his Satanic Bible about the modern church, you get the impression that they are either knowingly or unknowingly working toward a one-world satanic religion. This is what he's saying. And of course, he's crowing about it proudly. But for us, it's a fearful thing.
You know, I find still that many people, if they're told them about casting spells or invoking demons, would say, oh, baloney. It's interesting that in Butler's Lives of the Saints, there's an account of Saint Cyprian and Justina. Saint Cyprian was devoted to worship of the devil from his earliest years. He killed several people in part of these rites, and he was smitten by love for Saint Christina, who was a Catholic woman. He tried to cast a spell on her, and he found himself worsted by a superior power. Well, ultimately he converted, and he died a martyr for the faith in the days of Rome. People, they find it hard to believe that this really exists. What would you tell these people?
Tell them that the devil is very real. He's a personal power. He's a spoil sport of creation. And that his goal in his existence now is to pervert the creation of God. He wants to condemn as many souls to hell as he possibly can. And he's very, very active in this. The missionaries of the Catholic Church, in going throughout the world to bring the grace of Christ, found many people of pagan religions possessed by the devil, and they had to deal with this when they went out into primitive parts of the world. There is no question but that the devil is alive and well and is very, very active right now.
Father Sanborn, what is the Black Mass?
The Black Mass is a very evil rite, which is a parody of the true Catholic Mass, in which things take place that are not even describable in good company, but very, very lewd and evil parodies take place of the true Catholic Mass. And this is one of the rites of Satanists, Black Masses. They try to get consecrated hosts from Catholic churches and use these hosts in the most despicable way imaginable. That's about all I could say about it. I wouldn't even want to describe what goes on at a Black Mass.
You know, there was a section in Mike Warnke's book where he was gradually led to higher levels of satanic activity after he became a high priest. He discovered it was many secret levels he only knew existed, perhaps, but he was never exposed to them. At one higher level meeting, he referred to these people, or they referred to themselves as the Illuminati. And he was astonished that these were very respectable, powerful people who you'd never believe would be involved in satanic activity. And he actually went on to say that these conspiracy buffs were right all along, but the problem was much greater than they had ever imagined. That literally Satan is the prince of this world and governments tremble beneath him, and he's organizing this. Little after that, I read a letter from the Supreme Congregation of the Holy Office on July 13th, 1865, to U.S. bishops. And it said that certain secret societies which have as a goal the destruction of Christ as King of society are physically led by the devil. They actually used the word physically. What are we to make of this?
Well, we're to see that that is true, that there are some who are simply so completely given over to the power of the devil that they invoke him, and that he does in fact come to them in a physical form, and that he does speak with them face to face. I believe that's absolutely true. If you read what LaVey has to say in his Satanic Bible, he talks about the number of powerful people, and particularly in the entertainment industry, who are working hand in glove with him and his satanic cult. Makes you wonder, in fact, how many of these people have achieved such notoriety, such fame and glory because they have had the satanic power working for them, because they've sold their souls, perhaps. We see this very often in the modern music today. We see the rock music, and the heavier the rock music, the more heavy the satanic element in it. It's just open glorification of the devil.
Father Sanborn.
There was a concert in Los Angeles a number of years back where a great many young people took part, and at the end of it they were in a frenzy saying, "I love Satan, I love Satan, I love Satan." And I think that all you have to do is go to a record store and pull out one of the covers of those things to understand that there is something satanic about those rock groups. Anybody that would want to appear as weird and as sick as they do on the covers of those, to me, betrays a love of Satan. It's also true that that when you play some of these rock songs backwards, that there are satanic messages, which is, I think, responsible for the interest of the young people in Satanism. You see that all you have to do is stand outside a school as it gets out at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you see the symbols on their jackets and all. There is a real dangerous and foreboding interest that is visible among the young people for Satanism. I also wanted to point out, too, going back to the secret societies, that Leo XIII said of Freemasonry that it was the synagogue of Satan. That was a very strong term, but that's what he called it in his encyclical. That's what he said to the whole world, that Freemasonry, which is an occult society, is the synagogue of Satan.
Father Jenkins.
I have some teachers at my school in Cincinnati who used to substitute in public schools in one of the states, Indiana, in fact. And one of them pointed out to me that many of his students would show up with satanic symbols on their clothing, on their books, and they were very, very openly devoted to Satan. He even told one of them one day that he shouldn't be fooling around with that satanic stuff, and the student, who might have been a sophomore in high school, said, "Well, I'm not fooling around." They're very serious about this. And, you know, you promise a teenager pleasure and power, and it's a very rare teenager who can resist the offer if he knows that he can get it very inexpensively. Of course, inexpensively if he doesn't value the cost of his own soul. There's another thing about this satanic business. Just a few months ago in Cincinnati, a rock group was playing at a local bar in an area called Clifton. And this group was in the middle of a performance, and a couple of men got up to leave. They were walking out the door. The band leader ordered the people in the name of Satan to kill the two who were leaving. They got up and they beat them to death at the order of the band leader. This is the kind of thing we're dealing with. Now, one may say this is rare, but it's becoming more and more common. And especially in the young people, I think there's a great devotion, a maniacal devotion to Satan being cultivated. And it's pent up now, but it's going to be released before long, and the effects are going to be terrifying.
What has been the reaction of the post-Vatican II Church to all this?
That I know of, they have said little or nothing. As a matter of fact, I heard a story in California, which I assume to be true, in a Catholic high school. The students were told to go out to a different religion on Sunday and to do a report on what they observed. And one of the students, was assigned to go to the Satanists and to report what they observed at the Satanist church. I mean, when we think of people worshiping Satan, the human race cannot go any lower than that. A human being cannot sink any lower than to worship the devil. And the Catholic Church, in the face of this terrible corruption of the youth, not only of its own Catholic youth, but also of all youths, should be most vocal and should be taking strong steps to protect the young people and everyone from this.
Father Jenkins, we're running out of time, but I'd like to ask you one final question. We've seen this historically, that people can be attacked by demons and so forth. What would your advice be to someone who would seek protection? I mean, there's so many of these Satanists, you might offend someone unknowingly and he might cast a spell on you. You certainly couldn't go to a judge or an attorney and say, he's trying to cast a spell on me. They'd say, well, you're crazy. What would you say to these people?
Well, this is a spiritual attack that is going on. from the devil. Unfortunately, one cannot go to the modern church, the conciliar Catholic Church, for help, because many of the priests don't even believe in the devil. And even those who do seem to think about this whole satanic cult thing as a matter of psychology. And so psychoanalysis is really the solution. This seems to be the whole thrust of the modern church with regard to the sacraments and just about everything that the true Catholic Church holds sacred. The only real defense against a satanic attack is to be in the state of grace, to be pleasing to God. As you mentioned in the case of Saint Christina, she was pleasing to God, and she was protected by a higher power, by the power of God. Those who are attracted or beset by the power of the devil should realize that the devil is actually just a creature like ourselves. He can do absolutely nothing unless God permits him to do it. And so if we abandon ourselves into his power or leave ourselves vulnerable to him, we should expect that we're going to be in big trouble with him. But if we stay in the state of grace and live good lives, practice our Catholic faith, the true Catholic faith, we shouldn't have to worry.
Father Jenkins, Father Sanborn, thank you for a fascinating half hour. This has been